Okay, good morning, Ridgewood. We are joined today by definitely future Hall of Famer, Mr. Ron Knott. Mr. Knott, how you doing? And if you could give us just a background on your career in education, and then what you do. I mean, you have a lot of hats at the high school. What you do right now at the high school?
Well, good morning, first of all, and thank you for having me on. Chris and Dave, it's good to see you guys. This has been great. This project that you guys have worked on to assemble all of these interviews has been wonderful. But actually, I got into education 33 years ago after a 6-year career in the YMCA. And the YMCA indirectly led me to being a teacher. I'd always wanted to work in the Y ever since I have a summer cottage up on Lake George right by a YMCA conference ground. And it sort of led me, after working 7 summers at the conference ground, that I maybe wanted to pursue a career in the Y. My grandfather had done it way back when. And so I went to graduate school after finishing my undergraduate degree at the University of Saskatchewan and taking a year off, and we might get into that year off later on, but went to graduate school at Springfield College, started working for the Y in Harrisburg. Through the Silver Bay YMCA up on Lake George, I got a connection with the Ridgewood YMCA, moved there in 1983, and then also through the Silver Bay YMCA, knew Dr. Paul Folkemer, who for a long time was the principal at Ben Franklin Middle School. And after a meeting that we were in, he was talking about his needs for staff and the following year. And one of those jobs was a phys ed job. And my wife, I got married in 86. My wife and I had a baby in 87. And her career with American Express wasn't jiving with my ridiculous schedule at the Y. And having a more regular schedule with the school system seemed to work out better. So I took a job as a middle school phys ed teacher in the fall of 1987 and moved right along through 24 years at BF, and then was fortunate enough to be able to come to the high school because I wanted to teach Project Adventure, and got to do that 10 years ago. 10 years ago now. So that's the quick rundown.
That's awesome. I hadn't realized that you had been in middle school for so long. That's really pretty cool.
Well, most people get out in 3 years, but it took me 20.
Yeah, that is very true. So let's double back a little bit. You mentioned a couple of things. One, you mentioned that year off. I'd love to hear about that. But two, you said that you went to the University of Saskatchewan, which for those that are not geographically inclined is in Canada. That's right. Are you originally from Canada?
I am. I was born and raised in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Went to the University of Saskatchewan. It was almost one of those things that was a no-brainer. My dad was a professor at the University of Saskatchewan in agriculture, as you might guess, from the prairie provinces. And so I just continued on there, started out as a history major for 1 year and realized I was spending a lot of time over at the phys ed college, because that's where we practiced track and cross country and stuff. And that maybe that was the avenue I would take.
So talk to us a little bit about Lake George and that area of the country, and just kind of your memories growing up there and living there.
Well, I actually have a summer cottage, not right on the lake, but by the lake, right by that YMCA conference ground I was talking about. Lake George has to be one of the most beautiful lakes in the world. I've seen a lot of the world, and I have no problem going back to Lake George. In fact, I was there last weekend, and we'll continue to maybe do some remote teaching from my cottage, which now has internet capabilities and stuff. My grandmother and my grandfather, well, mostly my grandmother, built the cottage in 1922, so it's coming up on its 100th anniversary. And it's just been our family gathering spot. So I don't have a big family by any means, but we get there and spend time every summer there. And some summers it's been a whole lot more than just a couple of weeks of vacation or anything like that. It's been wonderful. And the lake's 32 miles long, lots of stuff to do there. And But in almost any capacity, it's relationships that bring you to anything that is going to be sustained, and it is the relationships through the summer at Silver Bay, through the YMCA conference ground, and people that I've known there for my lifetime virtually, because my birth was planned for March so that I could travel in the car on the way to Lake George the following summer. So my sister is also in that same boat. So
that's great. That's got to be a great place, just filled with tons of memories.
Oh yeah.
The one thing that I picked up on there too, you said you do a lot. You've seen a lot of the world. Do you do a lot of traveling in general, or is that something that you guys did as a family growing up, or what?
Yeah, my parents were big on travel experiences, and so as some of you may be aware that the university professors will often get a chance to take sabbaticals. And it usually is a chance to go, and even high school teachers can take sabbaticals. I'm not sure we do it so much anymore, but and it was a chance to go and either teach or learn something in your own field in another place in the world. So my dad held off doing his first ever sabbatical. You were eligible to do them at the University of Saskatchewan every 7 years. Well, he held off, and in 1968, we headed to Australia. And we did it by basically circling the globe. We headed off to England, spent 3 weeks in Europe, night in a day in Athens, Greece, and on into New Delhi in India, where my dad had us travel out of the city to visit former graduate students that he'd had. We spent a night in Nepal to visit the friends of my grandmother's. I don't think they were so anxious to see us, though. They were more her friends than ours. But anyway, then on through Singapore to Australia. Spent a year in Australia. Took 3 big trips while we were there. We were in Sydney. We went up the coast, inside the Barrier Reef. Missed seeing the Barrier Reef because of a tropical storm, but that's life. I have to go back now. Went down south to Melbourne and Adelaide and that area. Never got out west. And then my dad had relatives in New Zealand, so we spent Christmas in New Zealand that year. And then on our way home, we flew from Sydney to, I don't remember the order, I guess Hong Kong, and then Taiwan, and then Japan, where we met up with some more relatives, one of whom has worked for the State Department as a linguist. So he knew all the Japanese, and he got us around Tokyo like it was his backyard, because he just married a Japanese woman, and then back to Saskatchewan across the Pacific. So it was quite a year. But then other experiences through the Y. I went to Africa, visited Senegal, visiting it, not typical tourist locations necessarily, but things rather like a water project in Senegal, and a YMCA village in Kenya that the Ridgewood YMCA was supporting with a bunch of different projects. And then down into Zambia that was where we did a little bit of tourist work. We went to Victoria Falls and stuff. So I've gotten around a little bit. Yep. So it's been fun. Highly recommended.
My parents just took me to Myrtle Beach when I was growing up.
I went to the Paramus Pool.
Those are probably good experiences too, though.
I had a blast.
Like you said before, all about the relationships and the memories, no matter where you are. It's so true. Mr. Knott, one of the things I've noticed working with you for the last 10 years is it doesn't seem like you ever have a bad day. You're always positive. You bring a lot of energy to the building. The kids adore you, whether they play for you or they have you in class, or, you can tell there's genuine love there. Do you have a message for them right now as they're at home, maybe watching this and, kind of going through an interesting time in all of our lives?
Well, that's absolutely true. And I appreciate your comments. I like being at the high school. I like running into kids in the hallway and saying hi, even if I don't know who they are. And sometimes it's getting that kid who's walking down the hallway with his head down to raise their head because you said hi to Those things are the important things. And I think that that's really a key thing to remember, is that relationships basically in many ways build your life. I mean, my relationships with people from Silver Bay and Lake George basically shaped my career. I decided I wanted to go in the YMCA because of people I knew there. I got moved from one YMCA to another because of a relationship. I got moved from the YMCA to this Ridgewood school system because of a relationship. And those things are key. I think if you know people, if people know you, it makes a lot of difference. And I think it makes a lot of satisfaction in your life. I think it makes a lot of difference in the opportunities that you get presented with. And certainly that has been the case in my life. And, you know, I think that's the case for a lot of people. It's who you know. It's, you know, the coaches you work with. It's both of you I know have worked for wonderful coaches. One at the strange situation of having a female coach as a volleyball varsity coach at Don Bosco for you, Mr. Favish. And then there's no better person in many ways to deal with as a coach than Mr. Troy. The relationship you've had with him, Dave, over the years, those things make such a big difference in your life, and the influences you have. And some of the relationships I've had within the school district, sharing an office with Jim Stroker for 18 years, there's some really tremendously good things about that. And then there's the other side of that. But anyway, and maybe both of you know him a bit, but he's, you know, certainly one of those people who can be very influential. And, you know, I can't speak enough to how relationships will affect your life. And they're worth nurturing. They're worth exploring. They're worth going out on a limb for, because they will make a difference.
I love it. Real quick, you know, we're talking about coaches and coaching and relationships there. Just for the sake of letting everybody know, what sports have you coached here at RHS in your time here?
At RHS, my first experiences were with volleyball, which I started out as the freshman coach in the fall of 1989. Moved on, eventually became the varsity coach for 20 years, retiring just as this goes out about a year and a half ago. I was also the freshman girls lacrosse coach for 14 years. I've been the varsity boys golf coach. If you count this year, I think this is 7 years. I helped Mr. Nias coach ice hockey way back in the late 1990s. Just for a year and a half, or about the first couple of years that Ridgewood had ice hockey. Those are the high school coaching experiences, I guess. Oh, I coached freshman boys basketball the year that Jim Stroker's kids were involved in a car accident, and that happened right at the end of October, and they were still struggling to find a coach. They bumped everybody up. Jim Grasso became the varsity coach, and they bumped up the guy from the freshman position to the JV position. And right around Thanksgiving, in the week leading up to Thanksgiving, they still didn't know who the freshman coach was going to be. So I said, because I was in an office with Stroker and he was involved in those discussions, I said, look, if you need somebody, I can do it, but I need these weekends off because I run the ski club at BF. So there were certain dates I couldn't do, and they said, yeah. And I actually had a wonderful experience. The kids on that team were really outstanding. And now I see some of their kids at the high school. So
that's awesome. And I, like you just said, when you start to see the kids of the players that you've had and coached, it circles back to everything you're just saying about relationships. Yeah. You know, I feel fortunate to be in an age sometimes with social media that I'm able to stay connected with players for years and years. And so, you know, I appreciate all that you've done for all the kids at the high school and all the memories that you've made for them. Because so often you might not remember who you sat next to in history class, but you might remember the person that you sweat hard with on the basketball court and in games and things like that, or on the volleyball court, what have you. So, you know, and you certainly remember your coaches, and you know, so we know the impact that you've had. We hear that from kids, like Mr. Bailey was saying. So, you know, the ripple effect that you've had on Ridgewood students and now even Ridgewood parents, that their kids are now coming. is just, it's amazing. So, I just, from myself, I want to thank you for all that you've done, and appreciate it.
Well, it's nice of you to say that. My goal, I guess, in all of these situations is to provide kids an opportunity. And, I'm not so worried about whether the impact on me, although it's been very positive, but more the impact on kids and, where they can take those experiences. So.
All right, Mr. Knott, we're going to end with the lightning round here.
Okay.
Here we go. I know you're a big hockey guy. Favorite hockey team and then favorite hockey player of all time.
Well, my favorite team right now is the Rangers, but I grew up as a Boston Bruins fan, believe it or not. The Rangers are it, an original six team. And my favorite player probably, it dates me somewhat, but Gordie Howe. But Wayne Gretzky has to be up there as well. And, there's a bunch of the Rangers. Mark Messier was one of those guys who was the quintessential captain type a guy.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with any of those. Favorite breakfast cereal?
Ooh. Barbara's, what is it called? Morning Oat Crunch. And then I put some granola or something on top of it.
What's the last TV or Netflix show or series that you were obsessed with?
Working on Outlander right now. As I said when I was talking before, I started out as a history guy, and it tracks through a bunch of history. So Outlander right now, but Schitt's Creek is great.
And last book that you finished?
Well, oddly, I'm in the middle of a book right now that my stepson gave me at Christmas time called Rats. And it's kind of interesting. It's all about rats in New York City and the history of rats in the United States. But the last one I finished was one that my daughter gave me, and it's called Under a Red Sky. And it's the account of an Italian guy during World War II. And it's fascinating. It was really very, very good.
Awesome.
Favorite meal for Mr. Knott for dinner?
Ooh, I knew you might ask that. I was trying to think of some things that would make sense here.
Pretend you're on death row. It's your last meal.
Oh boy. Probably a lamb burger on a brioche bun, the little feta cheese and melted into it, and a little bit of what's the sauce that goes on a cucumber and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, you get the idea.
I was like, it's tzatziki sauce?
It's tzatziki sauce, exactly.
There you go. All right, last one. Would you rather have a tail or the gift of flight?
I love being in the air. And oddly, I'm afraid of heights, which you think that's crazy considering that I have been teaching Project Adventure 9 years. But I love being in the air and being able to look down. I went to Colorado in the end of February and happened to fly out of LaGuardia and went right over the place where I live right now and was fascinated. I couldn't get enough of the view and all that kind of stuff. So I'm definitely going with the gift of flight.
I don't know if you're an Instagram guy or Twitter. What's
that?
I don't know if you're an Instagram guy or a Twitter guy, but there's a pretty cool Instagram account. It's called Aerial Views, and it shows aerial views of different cities and places all throughout the world, from like satellites and planes, and it's really cool.
Well, I don't have either Instagram or but I have Facebook. But I want to add one thing because I vaguely referred to it back earlier on when we were talking, and that year that I took off between the end of my undergraduate year and my graduate school at Springfield College, that happened to be the winter of 1979-80, and I worked at the 1980 Olympics in Lake Placid. I worked in the athletes' village and got to meet a host of people. Those of you guys who know Monday Night Football, Don Meredith held the door for me one time as I was going out of one of the buildings at the thing, and I met athletes who I'll never meet the likes of again in my lifetime. But if anybody ever gets the opportunity to pursue that kind of an opportunity, you got to do it. It's just absolutely fascinating. The people that you meet, the people you run into. Now, the setting was a little smaller at that time than it is now whenever the Olympics are on, but it's no doubt one of the highlights of my life. So, and I couldn't leave this interview without that being thrown in there. Sorry, guys.
I was thinking that. I was going to ask you if you're at the Miracle on Ice, being up there.
I was outside the arena when they spilled out after the game was over. There has never been more electrifying attitude amongst a group of people. I mean, that was a really tough time. We were down on the Russians or the Soviets at that time because the invasion, they had just invaded Afghanistan. It eventually ended up, we didn't go to the Moscow Olympics in 1980. But here was this whole thing. The United States wasn't feeling real good about itself. We'd had all these people who were basically held hostage in Iran. That was just about to end. But, it was just a time when that was the uplifting moment. Many of you have seen the movie Miracle and can relate to that. But it was really neat to be outside. I wish I'd been inside, but I had to.
That's great.
Well, we want to thank. This was special, Mr. Knott. Really, I really appreciate it, and thank you for all you do for the high school, and not only the teacher you are and coach you are, but the person you are every day. It doesn't go unnoticed.
There's a lot of great people at Ridgewood High School, and you guys are doing a great job of finding them all. So keep up. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Coach. I appreciate it. Have a great.